Just sorting out the start of the stream. So I'm taking the established comic that I just made the other day, and I kind of realized I could do a better job. But sacrifices have to be made. So the first thing I'm going to change is I'm going to change Red's design just a little bit, so she's a little more simplified, because I'm still working on that simplification. So this will be a somewhat short stream. But I'm working on simplification of my protagonist here just a little bit, where I want to keep a little bit of that detail, but not go overboard on it, because I want to make comics that are a little bit more simple. So for right now, we're just changing up Red's design just a little bit. Because I'm definitely trying to speed up my development, my production time. Just because I'm sure I can do better. I was watching a few streaming tips from a few other artists and just getting some rough ideas. So you can see I'm condensing her body so everything is a little less, well, like I said, I'd say a little bit more stubby. Probably going to decrease the length of her legs here a little bit. So I was just doing a little bit of research on backgrounds and stuff the other day, and just roughly experimenting with how to do things. Because I was taking a look at some manga art for just some inspiration. Because there's some of those artists out there can do so much with just a little bit of time. And I know if I was drawing by pencil, I'd be working at time maybe 3 times the speed I am now, but I'm not. I like having control over all the pixels and stuff. So that's why I'm just drawing by mouse. There we are. So I'm still trying to keep that triangular shape with Red. Just because stylistically it's kind of appropriate. Even though the character herself is pretty symmetrical in terms of her personality and whatnot, I just wanted to play with the design just a little bit and get that charm to it. There we go. Oops. So I also needed to get a little bit more personality from her. So as opposed to the other panel up here, you can see the arms are limp, and that doesn't show as much confidence. Even though Red is a character who has terrible luck, you can give these characters some confidence. I mean, you know, I'm not just saying that because I've been watching a bunch of Three Stooges stuff and looking into slapstick humor and things like that I used to really enjoy when I was younger. So so how are people doing today? So you can see this gives her just a hint more of confidence, which is good, because it shows a little bit more personality for the character, since these comics are all pantomime. I just wanted to make sure that I found other ways to show who they are, because actions in comics are one thing, but you got to find other ways to show who a character is through body language and poses. I was rereading a few of my old favorite Sergio Aragonés comics, because Sergio is a master of pantomime. He's a fantastic cartoonist, and I'm always happy to read his work. So, oh, there we go. Hey, Suko. Yes, I have not updated Patreon. I meant to do that last night. I'm going to do it tonight. So this month's animation reward is going to be something a little different, because it's just going to be the cartoon that I'm doing. That's the advertisement for the gentleman. I just finished off another chunk of it last night. It's looking pretty good. I'm hoping to get that sorted out this week. So we got my father back home a week from this Wednesday, so he's doing pretty good. He's actually perked up a lot over the last few days, but the problem is every day is different, and that's just how things are when you have cancer. So he's doing mostly fine. He misses having beer, but until his kidneys recover some more, that's not going to be an option. But I've been sorting stuff out there. I got the paperwork on Monday that I have to drop off at the assisted living office, because I am now his caretaker. So there's other stuff I've got to do outside of that paperwork, because it's been like a year since it's been over a year since I've done any caretaking work. And you gotta document certain things for tax purposes as well as to get paid. So I've got I've got my dinner time documented. I've got some of the driving time and documented, and the grocery shopping documented. But I've got to add in mileage for my vehicle, because I have to look into this, because I'm getting paid through the state to take care of my father. And what I have to do is have information for them, and then I have to declare federal income later, and I'm just kind of wondering what I have to keep track of, which is probably going to be everything. So I'm just trying to get used to doing that on the side. So, yeah, on Monday my father has to have a computer. He's having a virtual meeting with his oncologist, and then after that he has to get another shot in his stomach to help his body purge out the excess calcium, because all the calcium in his bones, well, not all of it, but lots of calcium in his bones had been siphoned out by the cancer. This type of cancer is so damn weird. And I've learned a fair amount of it. I wish I could say I think I've learned enough, but I'm going to have to learn a little bit more. So he's still on some treatments. It's just getting everything going and staying ahead of the game. I've had a little less time to create. The other problem is we just last weekend was horrible, because the weather was 105 degrees here, and I can't work in that weather. Really, I got like tiny bits of work done on one of my projects, and that was all I could get done. And so everything has cooled off finally, and I'm finally, at the least, I'm thinking clearly. And when I think clearly, I can create. which makes me feel much better because my routine has been severely disrupted with all this stuff. And when I create, I function better. I don't know if it's just getting stuff out of my system or if it's just getting my mind to relax. So, since I'm in between projects just for the moment, because I have to sort myself out, I am taking the first episode of Dungeons in Debt and doing a comic out of it. And I think I may have sorted out how I'm going to do some of the cartoons. The animation quality will take a hit or two in certain spots, but not too many of them because I'm still trying to make this little world work, even though because everything has changed now, I don't have the time to put all the careful thought into making these stories sort of have a flow and a theme, because my time is going to be a little lopsided at the very least, because I've got to help take care of my father and I've got to take care of my mother, and she's usually off gardening, but she's got heavy stuff that she needs to move around, and normally she'd ask my father for that, but his lifting days are over. He doesn't even get to pick up the pugs now, because we don't know what condition his skeleton is in. It's lost a lot of calcium, and his bone marrow is another issue, but I've mentioned that several times, so it's just been, everything has slowed down a little bit, and I can finally focus on what I do a little bit more now that everything is finally calm. But I also don't know how long that's going to last, because every day is a little different. So my father has been doing very good for the last 3 days, and then today he's feeling kind of sick. We don't know. He got to eat pizza down at the local pizza restaurant that we always go to for the first time in a month. And I don't know if it's because he had too much pizza or if it was the salt content in the pizza, but he's been feeling a little off today. So we've been just giving him fruit and extra water to make sure his kidneys stay hydrated and they can keep flushing that stuff out of there. So that's been all my excitement. I'm mostly just happy that I can sleep, because when it gets to be over 95 degrees here, it takes a lot longer to cool off. So those have been my adventures, between that and us trying to get get a replacement fridge that'll be used. There isn't too much else going on here. We thankfully got the new water heater put in, because the old one exploded and flooded the cellar. So, hello, black fox flower. So, been a lot of adventures in the household, all of them small, but the heat has made everything just a little bit much. Actually, everything has cooled off for a little bit. At least this week it's going to be upper 80s, mid 90s at most. I'm happy about that, because we had 105 degree weather, and then we had 99 degree weather, and that's too much for me. I stop thinking clearly the hotter it gets, and it makes creating very stressful and hard. I need to do this month's Joy comic and get that finished off, because I had about half of it done last month. Yeah, nighttime makes up for it, even on the hot days usually, but I had half of last month's Joy comic done, and then I had to get my father to the hospital, and then we were stuck at home kind of waiting to get a chance to go visit him, because he got airlifted 3 hours away from where we live, because he was in critical condition. He probably would have been dead within a day or two if we hadn't gotten him in when we did. But unfortunately, he was not thinking clearly. We thought he was just being stubborn. It was how the cancer he has functions, because it's a rare blood cancer, and you can only get it from radiation, Agent Orange, mines, or toxic materials. I've heard Roundup is something that's possible. Yeah, so yep. Well, I need to finish stuff a little bit more because I've always had that problem of starting stuff and never finishing it. But that's what's going on over in my household right now, and so after 3 weeks in the ICU, he's back home. Every day is a little bit different. Some days are very good, some days are so-so. Some days he's very sore because the condition of his skeleton right now is very off, because he only has 20% of his bone marrow because the cancer cells invaded everything, and it also somehow sucked the calcium out of a lot of his bones, and the calcium flooded his kidneys. So this is a very strange type of cancer, but that's just what it is. So his prognosis, we don't know what his lifespan is going to be. He's stage 3. This type of cancer only has 3 stages, but it's more treatable than a lot of other cancers, which helps out some. Yes, he was SoCo, but we're pretty sure he got exposed to toxic minerals. So my folks lived in Utah for several years, and they used to go rock hounding over in Eureka City. Eureka City is an old mining town, and they were just there looking for was it agate, jasper, things like that, because my father collects rocks. That's something he learned from his grandfather, and they were around minerals that were toxic, and unfortunately the city does not have everything properly listed as, do not enter, warning, toxic, things like that. And that is most likely where he got it from, because it was probably about 10 or so years ago that they started doing stuff like that. So he is 64 years old now. He just started his Medicare paperwork because he is now disabled. His body is fairly fragile from what I've learned, but he's been mostly back to normal. The only problem is he's on chemo, and you get the side effects from chemo, like chemo brain, where your mind gets foggy because of the drugs you're on, or he also gets some fatigue and coughs. But the important thing is he's back home, because the first week in the hospital wasn't anything big because he wasn't sleeping. His body was recovering from the shock that it was in. The second week he was a little bit more lively and doing better, but he was kind of lonely. And then by week 3 he was by the time we hit week 3, he was ready to get the hell out of there and come back home, because he was lonely. There was nobody to really talk to. And the hospital staff, they're busy with other patients, so they spend a few minutes with you and then that's it. Oops, I forgot to remove the color out of this. So he's back home. His lifespan has been condensed. It's been whittled down. So we're not sure, but people who have stage 3 with this cancer, and every person is different. Half of them get 5 years. So, and every 5 years or so they get some new drugs or treatment for this stuff. My father's cousin's husband actually has this type of cancer as well. So right now he's not really allowed to have salt outside of, if it's like natural salt from eating animal fat is still okay. So if he wants to eat hamburger, he can have that, but you can't have anything that has excess salt in it. So we've just been cooking him natural stuff at home. He's allowed to still have sugar, which helps some because we're trying to get some weight back on him. The cancer caused his body to eat up a lot of its muscle, because that's something that cancer does. When you run out of fat for it to take, your body starts going for muscle, just because it's looking for some sustenance. So I've had to learn about a lot of this stuff, and I'm mostly just happy he's home. So we'll see what happens on Monday, though, because that's the virtual meeting with his oncologist. And my mom and my father used to work in the medical field for a while. My mom was a phlebotomist, and my father used to be an X-ray tech, which is where we initially suspected he may have gotten exposed to radiation. But there's not enough evidence for that, whereas encountering toxic minerals over in Eureka City, which has high doses of lead in the soil and the water, that makes sense. And don't think there's anything we can do either. As much as I told my father I would love to have the money to sue the fuck out of Eureka City for safety violations and stuff like that, but we don't have the money for that. So he's just going to have to go on Medicare, and Medicare will take care of his bills, because we don't know how much it's going to be. It's probably going to be over $250,000. That's not exactly the type of money we got. But I know Medicare is retroactive. I know this is a lot of older people stuff that I'm talking about now. But this is how this stuff works, because he's disabled with a terminal illness. That's how it is. Oh, you lost a dog to cancer last year? Yeah. Yeah, I used to be a caregiver for my grandmother, who was my father's mother, and cancer destroyed her. In her case, she had cancer spread through the bladder to the spine, to her kidneys, and taking care of her for what was the last year of her life was pretty hard, because first thing that happens is you don't have any energy. And so she was 85, but my grandmother still always had energy to get up and do something, like, get up and go use the restroom, get up and go cook something if she was hungry, or if she wanted to cook it herself, because sometimes I cooked stuff. And then she's just started sleeping more. And then I went on vacation for a week and a half because I needed a break from all the caregiving stuff. And then I found out that they had to take her back to the hospital. And then when I came back, she was on morphine and didn't even recognize me. And we got her home, got her into her hospice bed, and then she went to sleep and was not very lucid. Her younger brother stopped by to visit. That was the last time I remember her waking up, because after that she was pretty much in a coma. I was giving her morphine every few hours from an eyedropper, just because my grandfather was 92 at the time, so we didn't want to give her too much. So I was the one that took care of that. And then we got the whole family there to say goodbye, because she was fading pretty fast after coming home. Died about a week before her 65th wedding anniversary. So it would have been nice if my folks could have been able to be there and say goodbye on time, but their flight got delayed by about 40 minutes, and she passed away about... I don't know if she would have been able to hang on, or if she would have passed away by the time we got home then either. So, yeah, cancer's horrible. I've had my fill of it, but yeah, encountering toxic material to poison your body and create a rare cancer is not something I'm happy finding out that my father that's not a hand I would have wanted my father to get dealt, but we're just trying to find the positive in this, and I haven't quite found the positive in it just yet, other than at the very least he's back home. He's at home. He's mostly feeling better. He's unfortunately gets very foggy because that's some of the chemo and the other medication he's on. So it's not a lot of fun stuff, but it is what's been going on in my end of the woods. I'm still angry that this hit him this soon though, because he just retired 2 years early because he was having heart trouble, and he just needed time to rest up and do stuff. So the idea was you retire 2 years early, and then you get some time to finally relax and enjoy life. And he got about a year of that, and then this stuff all happened. I'm still a bit bitter at life over that, but I can't change it. It's an irritant. So, for right now, I'm just trying to create a little bit, get a chapter of this comic done, and try to get myself back on making comics also, because that's the last area I need to improve my skills on, since depending on how things go, which so far they're not going bad, things are kind of messy on my end for at least a little while longer. The real problem is trying to get back into animating and seeing stuff nice and clear. Because when I animate, even though I'm trying to get better at doing storyboards and just instead of just my usual playing around and doing whatever I want, I got to get a little bit better at the arts. Because I also need to get some better watch time here on YouTube. Oh, that's right, and I keep forgetting to do that video. Yeah, I keep forgetting to do the video, the welcome to my channel video. I'm in a pinch. I need some help. If you want to help me out, here's what you do. And just try and get some watch time there, but yeah, not everybody likes to sit back and watch artists do comics. Because I know some people just want to see the end result, and I don't blame them. Sometimes it's more fun to see the end result and see how it gets made, because you get to find out how tedious it is to do this stuff. So, yeah, well, good luck on your animation. It's a very cruel mistress. You can pour your heart out into something, and you can get ignored. You can get ignored very easily. And I know the way to get around that a little bit on YouTube is better titles and tags and stuff like that. I couldn't think of a funny title for this, so I just called it Dungeons in Debt. And even though I've had to kind of get rid of my story, because I was going to be a short serial adventure series with Red, either failing, breaking even, or sometimes winning, and trying to clear off what she owes. But I think everything is just going to have to be a little bit more Tom and Jerry. And Red is my Jerry character. And I've yet to design Velvet as my Tom. But I'm also still trying to figure out how to come up with little short stories. Oh, thank you, Soko. Yeah, so what I will end up doing is when I finish this comic, that's going to be part of the rewards for uh, for Patreon subs. That way you guys get a little bit more than just the usual Joy comic and the 10 or so seconds of animation, which so far, the little bit of animation I have done hasn't quite gotten there. Because I keep thinking about different ways to do stuff, and it keeps contradicting what I've done. So I'm just taking it with stride and thinking, okay, well, I've got this little bit of animation. I'll just hang on to this. Maybe I can use this for a shot somewhere else. Because I'm getting better at walk cycles. See, Black Fox. The point of creating is to never give up. Even if the idea doesn't work out the first time, you can always save it for a future idea as a reference. Yeah. My problem is I'm a perfectionist. And some of these ideas, I want them to be perfect. Just because I've had several things playing in my head for a decade or longer in some cases. And I keep getting scared to actually animate them. Just because I keep thinking, oh God, if I do this, I'm not going to be as good as everybody else. Or if I do this, what if it's a so-so idea all this time? Or what if it was never good to begin with and it was just something that I liked and I couldn't recognize that? But I can't let myself think like that. It wastes time. And I'm having to learn all over again in life about how important time is and how you got to spend it. So I keep thinking about Resident Evil right now just because of what just happened, where they just released that Netflix series and now that everybody is through laughing at it, everybody's come to the conclusion that we're never going to get a real Resident Evil adaptation on screen. And for 20 years, I've had an adaptation for the first game in the back of my head. I even wrote a terrible script for it back before I even knew how to properly write a screenplay. There's some meat there, but it needs a lot of work. So I'm thinking it's time to stop sitting on this idea and see if I can put out a fan animation that can actually make people happy. Even though it would be my own adaptation of stuff, and in terms of Resident Evil, the characters are the weakest part of the story outside of the villains, and that's where you have to get creative. Oh yeah, I've been wanting to do a Silent Hill one for a while also. The only problem with that one is I haven't quite gotten the right idea for some of it, but it's not that studios make everything so damn hard, and I'm not even somebody who's in the studio system. I just know my movie history to find out how crazy everything is. Yeah, you already forgot about the Resident Evil series, Soko? Yeah. Yeah, what I was going to do is I was going to do something very simple. It's just going to be two scenes. We have the story scene, and then you have the action scene. So the story scene is something that's meant to be intimate, not intimate as in sexual, but intimacy between characters is always a good thing to have, where it doesn't necessarily have to be something sexual. I know Hollywood loves their sex, and the general public too, but I've always preferred the other forms of intimacy myself, where you can just show ways characters feel about each other and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, Black Fox, if you ever get a chance to play Silent Hill 2, give it a shot. It's a completely... The movies get the games 100% wrong. The whole concept of the games is it's an internal journey in the mind of a protagonist or a character. And in Silent Hill's case, because there were in the first one there was a cult that worshipped their version of God, and this cult had taken over Silent Hill. And unlike your standard movie cults, this one there is something supernatural with them. At the very least, the cult leader. And in the first game, there is no Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head is specific to the second game. Yes, unlike the movie was terrible. The games are really good because they're meant to be these psychological stories about broken people. So the first game is about a father looking for his daughter after crashing in Silent Hill, and then you find out his daughter is somebody that the cult wants, and he doesn't know why, but he's out there trying to find it, and there are all these monsters that they don't make sense. And it turns out that all these monsters and everything else there are from the mind of his daughter, because his daughter was actually the cult leader's daughter who was offered as sacrifice to their version of God. The sacrifice went awry, and because this, she was a 12-year-old girl at the time, she realized what this evil entity that had gotten inside her was capable of, and she refuses to release the God. And so the cultists essentially try and torture her and keep her in pain so that she will relent. And instead, because she's got powers now because of this entity that's with her, she separates her mind from her body and essentially creates a new version of her that's a baby, and that child gets adopted by the protagonist in the first game, Harry, and his wife. So she gets summoned back to Silent Hill by the cult so they can finish the ritual. And then, unfortunately for Harry, he ends up having to kill the god. And by killing the god, he kills his daughter. But the original girl that had basically made a copy of herself to keep the cult from getting their hands on the entity that was inside her, saves him, creates one more copy of herself. So in a way, he doesn't lose his daughter, but now he's starting over with a new child. And then she saves him by purging him from the dark dimension of Silent Hill before she dies. And that was where the first game ended. The second game is completely psychological about a broken man who's just lost his wife. And he's seeing stuff there that doesn't make any sense. That's the second game is the one with Pyramid Head. And Pyramid Head is a psychological manifestation of James, the protagonist of the second game. And this is where why the second game tops the first game is it is a completely psychological Jungian game where it's all about what's going on in the mind of the protagonist and how the town of Silent Hill is essentially a form of self-purgatory. Attack on Titan. Blech. I used to like that, and then the series started to jump the shark. I think I left off, what was it, after Armin sacrificed himself to get the Colossal Titan and was dying, and then didn't die, and instead he becomes the Colossal Titan. That was when everything started to lose its flavor for me. But for what I was originally going to do for the Resident Evil short is I was going to do something that nobody has ever thought of doing. Even Capcom for some reason. And that is just something very simple. Start everything off in Chris's apartment. And it's just Chris and Jill at nighttime, laying in bed with each other, and just kind of having a conversation. So, oh, don't worry, I won't tell you any more. Or Black Flower, I mean Black Fox. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm not even gonna tell you when that happens in the story. For what I was gonna do for Resident Evil was just start it off with you've got a young couple who like each other. They've got some problems. I haven't sorted out how half that dialogue is gonna go in my head yet, though. And it's kind of a personality conflict where I've got somebody who doesn't like himself very much and isn't sure what direction in life he's headed, with somebody who is sure with what direction in life she's headed. And they're kind of just having a moment, the moment together where they're realizing, okay, well, do we want this to work out, or do we want to just cut things off right now? And then they get called into the mansion, and then I get to cut into the action sequence, because the action sequence, even though this is something that is a little different, do you remember the moment from the opening cutscene in the original game where Chris is walking down the hall and turns around and then sees something and he does that goofy scream? And then you get the bad CGI blood, and then it cuts to the game's title. I was going to take that moment, but have it be a chase scene where he's bursts through the hallway door and starts tearing down that red hallway, and someone's chasing him, and it's first person perspective, so you don't see what, but it's whatever it is, it's coming after him real fast. And then he smashes through a door which leads into the library and gets out of the way just as the yawn smashes through the door. Oh, no, Black Fox. If you ever see the original opening title to Resident Evil from 1996, it's back when they were doing live action acting. And so they had the actor who played Chris for the cutscenes there, and he does kind of a goofy scream. So I was gonna end it with a fight with the yawn where Chris kills the yawn. I haven't sorted out how. Part of me wants to have it be a goofy reference to the game, where it is he goes up to the second story of the library, and the yawn is down on the first story. And this is why I'm still trying to storyboard this in my head. He's got to pin the yawn somehow so it doesn't move. And then he pushes that statue that's over the dining room hallway. I'll just put it in there. He pushes that over the railing, and it crushes the yawn's skull and kills it that way. But there's other ways you can do this stuff. But yeah, after it's a brief fight after that. He gets injured on the way, because you can't have these characters go around and not take damage, and has a brief hallucination of seeing Jill, and when he comes to, it's a zombie, and then he kills it, and then it ends with him getting his marbles back, and then he has to go back out through that door into the hallway and go back into the section of the mansion he just ran through. And it would just be I would just do an animation variant of the old door opening sequence from the game, and then cut to black, where it's just you get a simple character. You get simple, but there's a little bit of something to him. You get to see that there's a little bit of story going on there. At the very least, these characters are people instead of caricatures and archetypes, and that would be that. And that would be my little short. But I'm still not too sure about it, because part of the problem is the yawn fight, because it's essentially a cat and mouse scene in the library. It's going to be poorly lit, so you can't see as much stuff. And the problem I've got with that right now is I keep trying to remember how snakes hunt, because I know some snakes smell through their tongue, and that's how they hunt. And then other snakes, not so much. They do everything visually, and I don't want to do the whole Michael Bay thing, where it's just action, 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 action. There is an amount of anticipation that comes with survival horror, and that's what I wanted to have happen in the fight scene, where it's just Chris with a shotgun and trying to find a way to kill the yawn. And that's I've got little ideas, but I need something a little bit more concrete, because it has to be a good fight scene. I know people wouldn't care about characters, and I know there are some people who wouldn't like having Chris and Jill be in a relationship, because according to the game's lore, they are poker buddies for life, and neither one of them has ever considered going out with each other for some reason. Although the first game and in Chris's ending, when you rescue Jill from the prison, you get a moment where she gives him a real big hug, and it kind of implies that there's a little bit more going on there, but I don't know for sure. But yeah, that's my idea. I've had that idea. I've had the rough idea for this whole story in the back of my head for 20 years, and I've just never gotten around to doing it, because every bad adaptation out there I see makes me wonder if anybody would even be interested in seeing something from someone like me. Even though I know there are lots of fan animations out there, when you do a fan animation for a joke, that's one thing. But if you try and do something that's a little bit more serious or grown up, well, then the standards and expectations get elevated. And besides, I don't even have a theme for this story, which, if you guys ever get into, if you guys are writers, in terms of screenwriting, you always want to have a central theme to the story, and I don't quite have one yet. I've got some, but it needs more to it. And another thing that you desperately need more than anything right now in terms of video game adaptations is you need characters who have lots of good character to them. So you want to have these characters that are very well thought out, that might have tells to who they are as people. So if you've got somebody who has a temper, and anytime they get angry, you see them ball up a fist, that shows that there's a little bit more there to who they are as a person. Or if you have somebody who gets scared easy, you might want to have somebody who kind of hides behind other people when they talk, and you look for little bits of direction like this to create something. So I haven't quite sorted that out yet, and I also want to have a version of Chris that's more masculine than what you see in Hollywood these days. A little bit more like the 1980s action hero, but not Rambo or anything like that. But these are just thoughts, because it's always interesting to try and take these characters, and instead of just making them you can't do a one-for-one adaptation, because when you do a movie, you got to put in flaws, you got to put in strengths, you got to put in all kinds of stuff to make them a little bit more of a three-dimensional character. But that's where the fun comes in, because then you get to all of a sudden make this character have a little bit more to who they are. And that's always something I really like when I can pull it off. Because nobody is a caricature unless they are part of the MCU. Because damn, the MCU has really gotten pretty bad. I'm still kind of surprised at what they did with Doctor Strange. Even more surprised that they hired one of my favorite directors, Sam Raimi, to do it, and they wouldn't let him do it. They reshot like 2/3 of that movie for some reason. And I think they ruined it because it didn't really feel like like something he did up until the very end of the film. The last 20 minutes or so of the movie felt like a Sam Raimi movie. And since I'm a big Evil Dead fan, I was happy that they left him alone to do something. But it's disappointing that you hire somebody like that to work for you, and you don't let them do their thing. But that's just me, and I know my ideas are a little bit more far-fetched than what you would see in a Hollywood thing. Which means, since Hollywood is about commercialization, I'd have to do some more work on making my stuff a little bit more commercial. As a matter of fact, Soko, Fantastic Four is being rebooted. Marvel is doing it. The problem is they had a director who was going to do it, and then he left. And he was the director of Spider-Man Homecoming. So he had enough working with Marvel. He's done all their Spider-Man films. But I just read a supposed leak about Doctor Doom appearing in the post-credit sequence of Black Panther 2. And it's supposed to be essentially the same thing that they did with Thanos when they introduced him at the end of Avengers, where he doesn't have any lines. It's just you see the character, so they would be a stuntman in a suit of armor, and then they'll cast the actor later. But yeah, he's supposed to appear in there, but they just lost their director. I don't know. Maybe they can hire Sam Raimi back and actually let him do it on his own, and he could direct it. Because that's the only way I would watch anything from Disney right now. Because I grew up watching Evil Dead, and I love Sam Raimi movies, even though he hasn't had a lot of good luck. Ever since he did Spider-Man 2, he's kind of been getting cheated by the studios. Because I know they screwed him over with Spider-Man 3 by making him shoehorn Venom in, and then they kept wanting more from him, and they wanted him to do the modern villains and not the Silver Age ones that he liked. Because if I remember correctly, he said he wanted to just do the Vulture in Spider-Man 3, and then they didn't want that, so he added the Sandman, and they said that wasn't enough, so they made him do they really made him do Venom. And then he had to work with what he had, and as a result, it was a weird mishmash of a movie. And it had some really nice moments to it, but they really cheated him on that, because if I remember correctly, that was Sony's emails got hacked and leaked, and they confirmed that they wanted somebody else to do Spider-Man after Spider-Man 3, and they didn't want Raimi doing it anymore, even though he'd earned them all that money, and the second they interfered, his movies lost their strength. And that's really sad. Kind of makes you wonder what's going to happen to the studio system that they have now, because they've been relying on this for too long, and they micromanage the hell out of everything. And I don't know. It kind of makes you think twice about seeing a movie when you find out how nothing that's made now is really done by the director anymore. Because if I remember correctly, so don't know if people know this. Oh yeah, you're not missing out on any of the new MCU stuff, Soko. It's horrible. Their quality control is gone. They are hyper focused on diversity to the point where if you complain about the film, they just call you racist, even though the film that they make is not good. They have lost their quality control. I don't have any faith in them doing Doctor Doom right, even though he should be the easiest villain in the world to do. But Marvel has lost the plot, and they are now just weirdos who don't understand anything of what they're doing. And they got lucky when Marvel first started out, and they were making all the right choices and everything. It was because they had people working in the studio who knew the comics. And then over the years, those people either left or were fired. And so what we're stuck with now is really not much of anything. Because Iron Man is about to be replaced by Ironheart. And I remember her comics. And she comes across as a psychopath who gets positive affirmation by everybody for what she does, even though she does stuff that would get other heroes in trouble, like violating international borders and things like that. And she's a very bland character, but she's going to be in Black Panther 2. She's kind of the MacGuffin character, from what the leak says. Because the villain in that film is the Submariner, Namor. If I remember correctly, he was essentially just Marvel's version of Aquaman, except for he was from Atlantis. And a few other things. It sounds like they are changing Atlantis to be the Aztec, because they hired a Mexican actor to do it, and they keep wanting to find ways to promote other cultures. But I'm not sure you want to do the Aztec for that. When you consider all the human sacrifice and stuff that they used to do, they were pretty far out there. It was like, what, a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, over in Mexico, they found a huge pile of human remains from under the ground that somebody dug up, and they were all missing their heads. And the media was on there, like flies on shit, talking about how violent the cartels are and everything else. Well, they had an anthropologist come take a look at everything, and it turned out that was an old Aztec sacrifice spot where they were beheading their their offerings, because they were very much about blood and sacrifice. But that's what they want to do. So, but yeah, the Aztecs were. The more you learn about them, you realize these are not the kind and gentle, benevolent people that I keep seeing. I don't know why. I've been seeing people assume that. But no, they were brutal as hell. That's part of what that was part of their culture. That's what made them who they were. I know people were giving Mel Gibson a lot of shit for doing his Aztec film. What was that? I don't even remember the name of that one. But he didn't skimp on the violence, because they were big on blood rituals and stuff like that, from what I recall. I know the conquistadors were scared the hell of them, because even though they had, I believe they had matchlocks at that time, the Aztecs were still a badass warrior clan. You can't. In a matchlock, you get one shot. So, but at some point, technology got better, and the Spaniards just had overwhelming numbers and took pushed the Aztecs into submission. Technology has a habit of leveling the playing field. It's actually why the South lost the Civil War. Not a lot of people know that. Everybody just assumes that they just got overpowered by the North, and nobody ever takes the time to consider that at the end of the Civil War, the South was fighting with the same weapons they had at the start of the Civil War, whereas the North was changing. They had more industry, and they had new weapons, and I can't even remember half the weapons they had, because they had lots of weird weapons that they tried out that never really worked. But yeah, the South for several years was holding off the North and winning, even though they were outnumbered. It was like, I can't remember if it was 3-1 or 4-1. But even though the South was outnumbered, they had better generals, because they had the majority of people from West Point, if I remember correctly. But also, they knew the land. They knew how to create choke points. They knew how to just hold everything off. It's very fascinating to find out why and how they were able to do some of what they did. Because if you have an army of 10,000 up against an army of 50,000, and that army of 10,000 is able to keep that other army from advancing for days in a wooded forest, that's impressive. That was the first time Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant crossed paths, and Lee was able to hold his position and keep them from advancing. But it was... I watched a documentary on this because it's always fascinating learning about history, but damn, Grant lost like 6,000 or 7,000 soldiers, even though he had the majority, and Lee had lost a lot too. But Lee's men were all in better positions, and they were able to withstand the firepower that the North had. And the more you learn about this stuff, the more it makes you just wonder how the hell they were able to do some of this. Well, both of these guys were very different types of generals. And Robert E. Lee was an old world general who came from the aristocratic family. And Ulysses S. Grant was the new world general who came from a very poor family. He did not have the social breeding or anything else, but what he had was a knack for hard work and figuring out positions on the battlefield in his head. And he was very good at that. Soko. So the North was where all the military industry was. The South was where all the crops and the nation's food was. And that's why when the South left, it was such a blow to the North, because now all of a sudden they've lost a lot of their food sources and their production for goods. They've lost the Mississippi, which used to be how they would export and import goods, because they had the Mississippi River, and they would just float those down, and everybody would get their stuff, and it was just perfectly set out for transporting goods. But they lost all that when the South seceded, and that's why the Civil War, while slavery was one of the things it was about so much more. It was about money. It was about power. It was about states' rights versus the federal government's rights. Even though I know I've seen history books try and look past that and say no, it was just about slavery. Well, no. There was actually one interesting dilemma that came with Abraham Lincoln being elected president, and that was because of how bad things were in communication and technology and stuff, when the time came for several states to vote for president and they were printing out their ballots for people to vote on, nobody knew who was running as a Republican. They left it blank, if I remember correctly. So all of a sudden, you have a chunk of the country find out that their candidate loses and to somebody who wasn't even on the ballot. That's pretty disenfranchising. But it's very weird. Well, slavery is not to detract from slavery issue, but we heard it was more of a talking point for any support than a kind of primary goal. It kind of was, if I remember correctly. It started off as a talking point that Lincoln used to use, but by the time it came to the end of the war, he was done with it, and that was it. He was getting he wanted slavery out of there, which is a good thing. But the problem came down to when Lincoln was assassinated. Everybody lost at that point. And the reason everybody lost is because Lincoln was so tired of fighting, he pardoned the Southern soldiers who would have been locked up for treason, and he wanted to unify the country again. And so his plan, there was going to be the Reconstruction where they rebuild the country, and they were not going to punish the South for what they did. They were still going to rebuild everything. Trust was going to have to be earned, but they were going to be diplomatic about it. But then Lincoln was assassinated, and that changed everything, because then people wanted to punish the South, and the South was hurting a lot, if I remember correctly from some of this stuff, that they were hurting real bad because they lost the war. They had lost so many of their young men, and they lost, as cruel as it is, since black people and slaves were used as farm equipment, they lost their farm equipment, and they had to start over from scratch. Well, the country went from being mad at them but willing to forgive in some states to outright loathing them over Lincoln getting assassinated. And then there was the demand for retribution. And unfortunately, when all this shit happened, to make matters worse, you had those fuckers from the Klan start coming to power. And that ruined everything. That's part of why reconciliation never happened. Because there was too much anger left over, and then there were the opportunists who were out there to take everything. Because at one point, if I remember correctly, the Klan was more about protecting people from the South, from the carpetbaggers, as they were called, from the North. The carpetbaggers were the people who would buy up land from destitute Southerners at a fraction of the price. And because they had bills to pay, and they needed money because everybody was starving because the entire part of the country was just destroyed, they didn't have a choice. It was either you get $30 for 20 acres or you get nothing. And at some point, the Klan shifted from this to racial politics, which just made everything fucking worse. It's really horrible, because I don't think the South has ever really recovered from that. And it's funny, even on I still see this shit on Reddit to this day, where the South is simultaneously they're the dumbest people from the South are referred to as the dumbest creatures on the planet. They're all just inbred hicks. They're all racist Klansmen. Everybody is seen as the same. but they're also somehow the biggest threat to the country. So they're simultaneously the dumbest people around, but also secretly geniuses. I it's an interesting contradiction. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why people still push that shit. It's pretty lame. I've got to be honest. But that's the thing. The South is always going to be the punching bag of the country. Even though I see a lot of similar behaviors happening happening over in the West Coast, which would be the North, where they're advocating for similar types of politics that would have gotten you in trouble a long time ago. But there's nothing I can do about it. I moved out of there. Thank God for that. But yeah, history. You get to learn all this crazy stuff in history, and you find out how depressing it is because history in the textbooks is oversimplified. And then you have to learn about this stuff because this is all the nuance. And this makes everything go from black and white to gray. And that's when you start finding out how muddy the Civil War really is. And then it's just kind of depressing. Because there's no way to simplify what happened. And the people who do simplify it make everything worse. Okay, I think that's going to be Red's new design. Yeah, I condensed everything here just a little bit more. Because you can see different body types. She's a little taller, and there's some more details. And I've still got some of those details I'm going to add in, but I just wanted to simplify things a little bit more, but you get just a hint more personality. I'm going to have to redo this panel a little bit more. I've also got to fix the tip of that arrow that I accidentally deleted. But yeah, this was one thing I was going to add when I did this cartoon originally, but I ran out of time. And I also didn't have the time to put it in anyways. So it was going to be the little character sheet over here, where you get to see the class of the characters, the name. So her full name is Red Rouge. Let's see, how do I feel about the Southern flag? I'd rather people left it alone. Because I've seen everybody get in trouble for it, where if you have it anywhere near you, you are now automatically part of the Klan. And the problem is, there are other connotations to that flag than being part of the KKK, because I know a lot of the descendants still have a fair amount of pride in their ancestors for standing up against the Union and in the war of northern aggression, as you could say. But I'm not a fan of tearing and removing history because it's ugly. I know those jackasses over in, what was it, Maryland, they removed the monument that the freed slaves had donated their money to. They had built a monument to Lincoln and his action of setting them free. And this was something that they paid for themselves. They just removed that last summer. And there's a video going around with one guy calling everybody else there ignorant idiots over it and how he wanted it there, and everybody's confused at him because he's black, and they're trying to say how racist it is because they have Lincoln standing before a man who is kneeling, And he said that's not what it is at all. That man is not kneeling. That man, the statue of the black man, he is not kneeling, he's rising. And I know he's rising because that man is a descendant of his. And it turned out that the guy who was the model that they used for who was rising onto his feet turned out to be Muhammad Ali's grandfather. And they got rid of that statue and replaced it with an Afro pick, from if I remember correctly. I thought it was a joke, and then I saw the article and everything else. I see all the Democratic politicians patting themselves on the back. There's no history to that, to a fro pick that could match what was paid for. And I just don't like that stuff. I like stuff to be left alone. That's why I didn't like them removing the Robert E. Lee statue. Because Lee was the big Confederate general. Even though he didn't believe in slavery, even though he freed all of his slaves, even though he worked with Stonewall Jackson's church broke state law by teaching the children of slaves to read, because slaves were not allowed to read back then. They broke that law openly by teaching them how to read in church. And they paid for them to have Bibles too, if I remember correctly. But there's so many contradictions to these historical characters. On one hand, yeah, he was a segregationist, and you kind of don't want to worship somebody like that. On the other hand, he had an army of like 17 million total up against an army of 40 million. And he held that army off and was winning for several years on his own. That is impressive. But then they also said that they were going to melt down that statue. And they said, which contradicts what they said earlier, because they originally said, oh, we're going to take it down, we're going to replace it with something else. But we're going to put that statue in the Civil War Museum. And now they've said that they're going to just melt it down into something current year, just to piss people off. And that's a shame, because you can't get rid of the ugly parts of history just because they offend you. You don't, like I said, you don't want people worshiping them either, but that's why you have a thing called education. But education has taken a real downturn, and I'm always kind of nervous about what my nephews and nieces are going to have to deal with. But one of my sisters is homeschooling her kids, partially because she couldn't get the support she needed for my oldest nephew, because he has learning disabilities and other developmental issues. And she also got tired of dealing with the school system being so lazy, because my grandmother used to be I think she was a middle school teaching assistant, but she had been a teacher herself also, and so she had used the old teaching methods to help kids with learning disabilities and stuff like that back in the 1960s, to help them sort themselves out so they wouldn't be left behind and or have to repeat grades, so they could keep up with everybody else. So that's what my sister has kind of inherited, that role. Because unfortunately, public schools can't keep up with that at all, because they are standardized to treat everything as one size fits all. And unfortunately, in the world of education, as I've learned myself, one size does not fit all. Not everybody learns the same way. So, yeah, well, that's the thing. If you never learn history, if you never learn the mistakes, you're just then you don't even know what to look for when you're repeating them. And I've kind of got a feeling that seems to be why public education is as bad as it is now. And it's sad because it's not like every teacher out there is terrible or not, or just half-assing it, but what's there is not good because everything has been standardized and micromanaged. And then there's also the administration is out of control, which is kind of funny because somebody posted a chart showing the rising cost of colleges over 30 years. And the reason college has gotten so expensive is because of the increased amount of school administration that keeps getting, they keep hiring more and more staff for administration. And then somebody that went viral, and then somebody outdid that Twitter comment by showing the exact same thing had happened in healthcare in the U.S. So it kind of makes you think. I'm going to have to redo this as well because now her body does not match this. But I'm getting there. Yeah, I want to try and get a little bit more detail here in her hair, just because I keep remembering one of my favorite artists, how he did hair. Yeah, well, I went back to college in, what was it, 2014? And all the students were like, it was like it was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where everybody's repeating what one person is saying while they're saying it. You're not taught to ask questions. That was the one thing I really did not like. And the reason I found out is because students get angry. Bunch of clowns. They're not doing themselves any favors. I already told the story about the one time that they shouted down the teacher over the idea that anything could be questioned in art or criticized. And about a third of the class started yelling at the teacher over that. I thought, you little pricks, shut the fuck up. Everything is up for criticism. It's not a bad thing. Harsh criticism does suck. I've had my share of that. But it makes you feel better. It'll make you feel better later on down the road that somebody caught something that you were doing and said that's not very good. And because every so often you start thinking a little differently off the criticism, and it helps you catch other mistakes down the road. But these are just my thoughts, because I really want to get my stuff better. And unfortunately, the only way to do that is to make mistakes, and making mistakes kind of stinks. But okay, so we have red redone here, which is good. So yeah, this is a little bit more toony. The body proportions are just a little bit stubbier. I should probably just adjust this by increasing the size of her calves a little bit. It'll make everything look a little bit more toony, I suppose. But the idea is she's supposed to have some muscle on her. So there's supposed to be just a little bit more mass to her as a character. But I'm contemplating how to get tunes done really fast, and then I remembered the fastest way to do a tune is to do a single shot project where there are no edits. Everything has to be framed in a certain way so you can see everything that's going on. And I haven't quite sorted out how I want to do that yet. Because the first tune I'm going to do is with Red encountering a mimic. And it's just going to be a single shot tune. I just haven't sorted out the joke yet. Because I want the mimic to do something funny. And I don't know what that funny thing is going to be yet. Because I could do the classic, eat the character, then belch out like a sword or something like that. And what I was actually looking at doing was taking some TF2 sound clips and having a few, basically having, she's in a treasure room and there's a few mimics there. And she gets eaten, and then one of them starts laughing, and then they all start laughing, and I just take some of the TF2 laughing sound files there, just so it's something a little bizarre. And then it would probably just be a short 12 or 15-second tune. I just need something funny in the middle to happen. Because I've got my little formula here where if I do a tune that is, say, 20 seconds long, 10 seconds into it, something weird has to happen that catches your attention. So something in the middle has to happen. And I'm not quite sure what that is yet. And I don't think that's going to work for chainmail. Because I just need to add a little bit of extra detail here for her. Because this is the arm that has armor. Because in Chapter 1 she still has her nice suit of armor. And then after that she's down into just leather armor. Doesn't really have a nice weapon or shield anymore. Let's take a look and oh, I don't want that. I want manga chainmail reference. That's what I wanted. Ooh. Damn. Oh, and of course, the first chainmail reference I encounter is from Berserk. Yeah. Okay, that's how Miura did it. Damn. Yeah, even though he's been dead for a year now, his art style is still real strong and just there to give you ideas for how to do stuff a little differently. Yeah, I was overlooking some old art that I used to do the other day. I don't have much because of my nature as a perfectionist. So I looked at an old sketchpad I did back when I used to really be into Final Fantasy Tactics. Because my favorite, he still is one of my favorite character designers, is Akihito Yoshida. And I don't like his new stuff as much as I like his old stuff because his artwork for Vagrant Story was fantastic. I always did my best to try and emulate that, and I could never even come close. But he had this really interesting way of doing texture for hair, for armor, for scales on monsters, for grass, for trees, all that stuff. He was so good. And he doesn't draw like that anymore, which makes me a little sad. But there we go. Yeah, okay. Let's double check this a little bit more. So I will put some ridges over here. About time? Yep. Just had to mute my mic real quick. Got furniture we're going to have to move because we're having company over. And I'm just going to have to finish this stream up just a little bit sooner than planned because it is dinner time. Boy, does that it's funny how just a little bit of detail like that looks so good. And I accidentally put that in as a poll. But yeah, all it takes is just a little bit of detail like that. Damn. Everything changes. So, okay, well, I've got to go make some dinner since my folks are getting hungry. And I also have to start cataloging my time on this because that's part of my job now, even though the state only pays me 10 hours or so a month. I'm more than happy to get 10 hours of pay a month to help chip in more on rent and stuff like that around here. So I will do another one of these streams this week. Everything kind of depends on how Monday goes. But I need to get back into an animation straight because I need to put out the new somewhat condensed art style so I can show off what I'm doing with that, because I really want to start doing I want to get fast enough on this stuff so I can start doing tunes where I can start making them in real time so you guys can see what's being made at the just because it's something a little different. But for right now, that's going to be it for this stream. I'm shutting it off about 20 minutes early, but that's going to be that. So thanks for hanging out with me for today, and that's that. So stay safe, everyone.